things that happen that's beyond us that we can't just force to happen.
Yeah.
But then again, I see a lot of people at church that just every little thing, oh, God did this. Oh, God did that. I was like, really? Is it? So I guess I question everything. I try not to be superstitious, but when things happen that answered prayers that I just didn't expect, I'm like, wow. And it's more than circumstantial.
Yeah.
So that's what builds my faith, is
Okay.
just situations like that.
Answered prayers, that's more than circumstantial. Morning. You got time for a short interview?
I'm sorry, what?
You got time for a short interview?
How much time?
I have time for about 5 minutes.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Are you okay if I record it?
It's definitely fine.
Okay, cool. My name is Eddie.
Oh, let me turn off my music.
No worries.
Just walking the dogs.
Is that, okay, that's a
Corgi.
corgi, but is that, it looks like kind of like a beagle.
She was abandoned, so I'm not sure where she is, but I think a beagle.
Yeah.
She might have something else in her, but I don't know. Our friend couldn't take care of. They found her and couldn't take care of her, so we just took care of her. So
She definitely got the, or he,
she, yeah.
she has the beagle face, but she seems a little taller.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me kind of explain what I do. I'm doing something called Street Epistemology, and I basically just have short conversations with random people, and I ask you to pick a belief that you really think is true, and it could be anything, and I ask questions to understand what you believe, why you believe it, and how you concluded that it's true. And it's really cordial. I kind of stay neutral to whatever the topic is, but what I'm really trying to understand is the method people use to come to knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So real quick, my name is Eddie.
Okay, I'm Julie.
Julie?
Yes.
All right. Let's see, that's going to be Julie. Okay, cool. So typically the conversations are more interesting if it's something that you really think is true, and it's maybe part of your identity, or like, for example, if you woke up tomorrow without that belief, it might change your actions in some way, so it affects you. But it can be really anything. If you're not really sure, I can give you some examples of typical topics. But
okay.
You want to give you some topics?
Sure.
Okay. So it tends to go the supernatural route, but it doesn't necessarily have to.
Okay.
So I've talked to people about, I saw a ghost. I believe aliens exist. And it can go another direction, like I believe in the theory of evolution. I believe prayer works. I believe a God exists. I believe horoscopes predicts my day. So just as long as it's something you're fairly confident in, it tends to be more interesting.
Okay.
Anything ring a bell?
You touch on all the topics that I guess. Well, I've never seen a ghost or experienced, anything, UFO or anything, so I don't have any comment about that. I grew up. My family are Buddhist.
Okay.
So I grew up going to the temple, doing the rituals and things, and then. But what's interesting is my parents worked a lot, and so they wanted me to learn good morals.
Okay.
But they didn't have time to parent my sister and me, so they somehow, I don't know how to do it, because we were first generation Vietnamese in America. We were refugees from Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
So my parents somehow got in touch with this elderly white couple that would come to our house every Sunday. They even knew about like offerings, so they gave each of us $1 to put in the offering at church. So we went to church, and so we learned stories, about just Adam and Eve, and just all the Bible stories, and then we go to the temple. So everything, and then you go to school. I go to school, and I was in ESL for a while, English as a second language.
Okay.
And so just learning two cultures at the same time. We only spoke Vietnamese at home, spoke English at school, and learned about Little Red Riding Hood. So they were all just stories. So I didn't believe in anything. Everything was just interesting stories.
Interesting. Okay.
And then, so that was my life. And then so we talk about horoscopes and different things. So they my parents worked a lot. I was bored growing up, so they just had, I do some of the things they had, like, playing cards. You can kind of somehow with the numbers predict things, and I just realized it's not true. Nothing's,
Okay.
nothing, like they say what happened, and same with horoscope. And then I actually went to medical school in San Antonio.
Okay.
And they had a Christian Medical and Dental Society organization that they gave us free lunches, and they just pray and give a little mini sermon, I guess, for the dental students and medical students. Well, I didn't know anything about that. I mean, I had gone to church a little bit as a child, and so one of my friends, and I had several Christian friends, but they never really told me about the faith. But they just said, "Hey, Julie, you're tired of the Subway sandwiches every day?" And we just had Subway sandwiches and Pizza Hut. That's all we had. So I was really sick of the food. So they said, "Come, there's free food. Just come." They didn't say anything about what it was. So I went, and it was like one of those, what do you call those things? The classrooms where it's kind of like more like a.
Oh, like slanted.
Yeah, so it's kind of like it's like a kind of like an oval. So you kind of. You can see like the audience always sat kind of high like this, but you can see each other. Anyway, we got through this long line, and then I got all my food, and I was like, oh my gosh, home cooked meals, it was awesome. We sat down, and then they said, okay, everyone bow your head to pray. And then I was like, what? And then I was like, because I didn't know what it was. It's just free food, and what they told me. And then everyone bowed their heads, and I kind of went along with it, but then I felt so horrible. It's like the feeling you have like if you weren't invited to a wedding and you showed up.
Invited to a what?
And if you were invited to a wedding, like you weren't invited, but you just happened to be there, and you like, hey, there's free food, and you eat, and then you realize you're not supposed to be there. But I felt like that, like it was some country club that you don't belong to, and yet you're there eating the food. That's what it felt like. So in that kind of oval-shaped room, I was in the middle. I felt like just getting up and leaving because I was like, I don't belong here, and I'm eating someone else's food. No one said you don't have to be a Christian, to be there. No one told me, so I felt awful. But then
got off his leash.
Oh, Kimmy, she does this every once in a while.
No worries.
I basically felt horrible, but then I thought, okay, but if I get up and leave right now, everyone would know I'm not a Christian because it's bow your heads and pray, and I.
It's awkward.
Yeah. So anyway, so I stayed. I ate the food, and I told myself, don't go back. And then the next Thursday comes around. I'm in the line for Subway sandwiches, and one of my friends said, "What are you doing here? Let's go. Let's go to the luncheon." And she grabbed me and took me, and I thought at that point, if I said I can't go because I'm not a Christian, then she might say, well, why did you eat all the food and go last time?
You're invested now.
Like in my mind, I'm thinking, you got stuck in this lie. You ate the food. It was really good. And so I went again. I was like, oh, here I go again. I could not come up with a good excuse not to go. So I went. But I met, I didn't even know what the arrangement was, but I later found out they had local pastors from different churches that would come and just encourage all the students, because we're kind of isolated from the world. We just study all the time. So one of the pastors, his name was Don Guthrie. He later married me and my husband. So he just talked about how Christianity is not about, just going to church on the Sunday. It's not, a lot of the men sit there at church and they're thinking about what they have to do, like mow the yard, and all the women are staring at each other's clothes, and it's like a social event. He says, not any of that. And I'm thinking, well, that's what I see. What is it then? I was curious, and that curiosity led me to go up to him. And I was always such a shy person, and I went up to him. I just shook my hand, and he introduced himself, and I started going to his church. And each time I went, it's as if he was just directly talking to me. I just started crying. There is a God. And then I realized I was in medical school. Just to think that it wasn't just my decision, that he had his hand in it, and things just started making sense to me. It just felt like, I guess they call it the Holy Spirit. I don't say, people say, oh, the Holy Spirit spoke to me. I'm like, he did? I don't hear anything. I'm not the type that just, I don't know. I'm a concrete person, but and my husband, at the time we were dating, he's a Christian, but he didn't really push me.
Mhm.
So I came to know the Lord on my own. So that was
Mm.
kind of cool. So,
Okay.
and that's why we're in Tyler, because I grew up in Houston, and this is his hometown, and I realized I really wanted a place where a school that would help my kids learn about the Lord too. So our kids go to Grace Community School, and it's awesome. So as they're learning Scripture, I'm learning along with them.
Okay. Okay. So you said you were short on time, and I didn't get a chance to ask any
Sure.
questions. So is it okay if I set the timer for 5 minutes? Do you
Go.
have 5 minutes?
Go.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. So that was a really cool story. I appreciate that. Okay. I use a scale from 0 to 100. I want to quick get a sense of your confidence that what you believe is true. So I guess if you were to put that belief in a truth statement, what would that look like?
A
Like,
truth statement.
you don't necessarily have to say this, but like Christianity is true, or the Christian God exists, or something like that.
So I guess I don't, because I guess growing up Buddhist,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, then when I got into the church, I learned there's Methodists, there's Protestant, like different denominations that I had to, what is Seventh Adventist, what's, the Church of Christ, so what is all of this, So I don't consider it as a Christian view of the Lord. I just feel, I guess I don't compartmentalize who God is. I just feel like
okay.
God is God,
Mm-hmm.
and what the Bible says is true. And so when people ask, what's the Christian belief? I mean, I think sometimes Christians even themselves add to it. But I just believe that there is a purpose for us, and when we meet him one day, he'll show us the things that we don't
Gotcha.
always
Okay.
see.
So okay, gotcha. All right, I want to get a sense of your confidence using that scale. So 0% would be I have all questions, no confidence. 100% would be I have absolutely no questions, all confidence. I cannot be mistaken about this.
Confidence in God.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Where would you fall on that scale?
I would say 100%.
100%. Okay. And I've heard some of the reasons why you are at that 100% mark, but I just want to make sure. Would you say is like the main reason that gets you to that 100%?
So I mentioned before how like there are, horoscopes and all these things you do. It's superstition.
Okay.
And I'm not, and I think I grew up with that, and it was disappointing to me because it's like nothing's true. But then circumstances would happen. For example, my great-grandfather was 100 years old before he died, and it was amazing. I was in a Bible study group, and the ladies said they'll pray for me, and at the time I was so worried about just what his eternal, where he's going to be. So I tried to witness to him, but it was so difficult. He couldn't hear very well. It's the language barrier. I probably speak Vietnamese like a maybe at a level of a first grader.
Okay.
So there's that, and then also it's disrespectful for any child to be speaking to an elderly about any topic because they're supposed to be older and wiser. So it's so I had all these barriers, and then I don't know the Houston's the streets in Houston very well. So whenever I go to different new places, my parents always took me. So, and my parents are not believers. So I was like, how do I have the time to even say all this, with my parents around? I needed time alone. Anyway, the ladies at the Bible study prayed for me, and I went there. I mean, I was working in the hospital. I was tired. So by the time I got to Houston, I literally walked out of the car saying, God, if it's going to be you, because I'm too tired, I can't think straight. I just feel in my heart I just want to witness to my great-grandfather, but here's all the barriers, you go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went in, and somehow just the whole day there was delays and different things that my parents ended up leaving for a bit.
Okay.
And then the nurse who took care of my great-grandfather, was her first day of work, and she witnessed to him whatever words I didn't know, she filled in. I mean, all these things that would happen that just gave me goosebumps. I'm like, I didn't even I didn't have a plan, and that's how I feel. Like it made me think there's things that happen that's beyond us that we can't just force to happen.
Yeah.
But then again, I see a lot of people at church that just every little thing. Oh, God did this. oh, God did that. I was like, really? Is it? So I guess I question everything. I try not to be superstitious, but when things happen that answered prayers that I just didn't expect, I'm like, wow. And it's more than circumstantial.
Yeah.
So that's what builds my faith. It's just
Okay.
situations like that.
Answered prayers, that's more than circumstantial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if those answered prayers that were more than just a circumstance didn't happen, let's say hypothetically that never happened to you, you wouldn't be at that 100% mark?
Good question. So there are unanswered prayers still. Like, for example, my parents are not saved. My sister isn't saved. The rest of my extended family aren't saved. But I think enough things that happen that I trust God in His timing, that I don't say, again, we're talking about compartmentalizing the Lord. Like to say that, if you don't do it in my time frame, then therefore that must not exist, or you might not. I guess my faith isn't so much that, He's not a God that does things my way. So I don't just discount that, well, it's not an answered prayer, therefore He doesn't exist.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, so you're saying that there's not a specific time frame. Like, it's not like your prayer has to be answered in 24 hours. It's not like it has to be answered in 1 year. It could take time. Okay. If there's no time limit on, he's looking.
Yeah.
If there's no time frame and it can take very long for prayers to be answered, is it possible that circumstances would eventually answer or account for a prayer that that you had? Does that make sense? Okay, let me ask you. That's a bad question. I'm sorry.
I'm calling you like I don't understand
Okay.
what you're saying.
If a prayer wasn't answered,
Okay.
In that example, let's say where that you were trying to witness to your grandfather, if that prayer wasn't answered, what would have that looked like?
There are things that happen that aren't answered, but they would situations where it would be answered in a different way or a different time. And that's the cool thing that I allow myself. Like, for example, my sister and her husband were at one point considering going through a divorce, and for different reasons, and I prayed about it, and things just didn't happen the way I would want it to. So there are times where I would be disappointed, but sometimes what happened in that situation, it wasn't me witnessing, it was through someone else that they decided to stay together, which was cool.
Yeah.
But in that circumstance, so it made me feel like, one of the things at that time I thought was like, well, I prayed about it and I'm going to do this, and with you helping me, and it turned out that it actually happened in a good result, but it wasn't through me. But it made me realize it's, I just can't just pull God along and just assume that that's what's happening. But it's just humbling that and cool to know that when He doesn't need my help in that it still gets done.
Yeah.
In some ways. So yeah.
My question is, what I want to know is, do you have a feedback loop to tell you if a prayer didn't work? So, for example, let's just assume any of those prayers that you were speaking of, and you can choose whichever one it is. Let's assume that prayer didn't work. What would you be looking for to determine that it didn't work? If we would just assume it didn't work.
Well, actually, even with what happened with my great-grandfather, it wasn't to me a success, like, oh, I witnessed to him and he came to know the Lord. He died within several weeks of that conversation, and I didn't know. I mean, we don't know. He may not have believed, and and it. So, was that a partial success, but not really? Like God helped me witness to him, but then he didn't choose. So
Mm-hmm.
I I think I think so much of he's. I feel like God has helped me with so much all along that it makes me think if things don't happen exactly the way I want it to,
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't exist. That it's still a personal decision between, like, for example, my great grandfather and him. So I guess it makes it kind of. I guess I realized that just like how life can be complicated,
Mm-hmm.
that the God that I believe in is more knowledgeable than I am, more complex than I am, so that if things don't happen that say, I need you to do this for me to believe you, I guess I'm kind of gone beyond that just that he has given enough reassurance to let me know that he's there.
Mm.
That like, for example, it's something silly. One time I was praying, I remember I was praying hard for a friend, and in my prayer, this is so crazy, I you sometimes get that tickle in your throat, and it just you just start coughing. I get into this coughing fit, and I remember, and I never can get out of it. It would just be like several minutes. You just keep going. But I remember in that moment, I just said, like, I'm in the middle of a prayer. Stop this, and it for the first time. It doesn't always work, but at that moment, I felt like something, or just try to get my attention from what I was trying to communicate to the Lord, and at the moment it went away, the obstacle, which almost supernatural, but
Okay.
it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But when it
So if you pray about something and you see it work, that gives you that confidence, that 100% confidence. That's what it seems like. But if it doesn't happen, it seems that maybe you realize it could happen later, or
happen later,
or it may not
happen
be at all.
but it may
Okay.
not be part of his plan. Like I don't feel like, I mean, it goes back to being God, seeing all and knowing all, that it, like you, it may not be, just
Yeah.
because it doesn't happen the way I want it to, doesn't mean that he doesn't exist.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Is it possible,
Okay.
and I'm not saying this is the case, is it possible that prayer isn't working, but coincidences happen, and when those happen in favor of prayer, we interpret them as working?
That's a good point. So I guess that's the way I would think of more like superstition. The way I grew up, where, like, for example, you go to the temple and they have like two halves of a, it's like it looks almost like an oval egg-shaped wooden, I don't know what you call it, but it's two pieces, and it's like cut in the middle, so it's smooth on one side and oval on the other side.
Okay.
And you there's all these different predictions, and what happened is all the predictions for that whole year is in one of those, it's like a stick and has a number, and so you're supposed to pray to the gods, and you shake it. You
Okay.
shake it enough that eventually one of them will fall out. Once it falls out, and these two pieces, you have to drop it, and if one's up, one's down, then that is the prediction for that year. If both of them are down or both of them are up, then you didn't do it right. You have to redo it. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I would take forever, because I'm like shaking, and like several fall off, and like I have to do it again. I'm like, please, just to get that sequence right.
Yeah.
And then it would say something like, it literally say something like, this is going to be a bad year for you, okay? And and so, yeah. And so my mom would read it and say, oh, and so like literally every little thing, like say I got a flat tire, oh, it's because it's your bad year, something would happen, it's because you have a bad year. And so a different year, like say it says this year is going to be great, you have a good year. So if I had a flat tire, you know what my mom would say? it could have been worse. You could have died. You know, like so, like bad circumstances like that, like because it's a good year. I'm like, what's the difference? You know, like the same things happen and it's bad things. And she said, well, it's because it's your good year. It could have been so much worse than what happened to you. But anyway, so that's how I feel. That's exactly what I'm thinking. Like in the church, sometimes I see like every little thing that happened, people go, oh, that's from the Lord, you know. So I actually, some of my prayers are, God, I don't know, this is from me. This is what happened. Like job opportunities, for example, will come up, and sometimes it ends up being not good fit. And I don't pray in terms of like, this sounds great, Lord, make this happen, you know. And you know, I pray more of, it's a conversation like, this came up, what do you think about it, you know? And so it's a kind of a daily conversation. And so I think the difference between that and what I grew up with is just, I feel like what I grew up with, you just try to convince yourself of whatever is you believe to be true. Like if it's a bad year, then, oh man, boy, I cut myself, but my gosh, you know, I could have like fractured my finger, you know, like, so that kind of thinking. Whereas when I read the Bible, I feel like I understand how Jesus lived his life, and you know how they say the word is, what would Jesus do? And I try to live like that, and so it's more conversational. So I feel like the ups and downs, I don't get totally excited yet. I would just wait to go, well, what do you think? And then sometimes it'll be a closed door, but then I feel like just in the conversations, I realize sometimes something else will come along, and I'll go back and I'll go like, I prayed for that, I really wanted that, and you knew that, but it didn't happen. Now I know why, because it didn't. But it's more of it's not so, not because I already came in. I guess the difference is of me ultimately thinking I'm in charge versus he's in charge. So I don't go through situations expecting, oh, this happened, it must be from the Lord, you know. It may not be part of his plan. And sometimes I kind of just not get too happy or too sad, just kind of go with it, and then I wait, and then I find I feel like he just gives me that clarity, so I don't just step into something. I mean, I see people all the time, and I'm like, sometimes I ask them, so how do you know that's what the Lord wants for you just because that happened, you know? I do that too, and so I find myself doing that, Lord, and I ask the same thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not that I don't have doubt. When I have doubt, I ask him about it too, and I wait on him, and then eventually things will come out, you know, become more clear. And what I do notice is he always takes care of, like, you know how the Bible says, like, you know, the Lord knows the desire of your heart, and so when you're aligned with him, things tend to work out so that that it's never more than I can handle.
You know what would be interesting?
What's that?
Is if you were able to maybe log your prayers and maybe keep track of which ones are running.
I do.
And which ones? Oh, you do? Interesting. Okay.
I do. So that's why I come back, and there's some, like, you know, I would put down, like, for, you know, for my parents to know the Lord, and it's just, you know, and every once in a while I just keep going back to that, and he knows, and I just keep praying about it, but it doesn't make me think he doesn't exist. I just, because it's, again, also their decision. The last time I brought it up to my mom, which was years ago, about Jesus, in Houston, there's all these different Vietnamese channels, TV channels, radio channels. So there are some, like, Christian stuff on the radio, but they're more, I think, Catholicism. There's a lot of, I think a lot of Vietnamese people are Catholic because of, I think, oh gosh, I don't know my history. I think there's a French influence. Anyway, because most of the people in Vietnam are either Buddhist or Catholic.
Okay.
So anyway, so I would try to tell my mom about Jesus. One day she just put her hand up to me and she goes, "You might believe in all that, but I hear all about that on the radio, and you can fall for that, but I'm not going to." So I'm like, whoa. And then my dad, he would sometimes at the dinner table when I visited in Houston would kind of chuckle, and then he was like, I really don't know what's going to happen when I die, and it scares him. And I just wish so much to tell him, but I kind of just pray before I jump. Like the timing, just like what happened to my great grandfather. I don't. Sometimes when I kind of do things in a way, I feel like I'm pulling God through. Like I want this so much, I'm just gonna do it. I just don't wait and just make it happen. Sometimes it doesn't go too well.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, but I do have that. And so my parents, my sister, my extended family, they are on that list of unanswered prayers still. But I do some of the stuff I see, and I come back and I just put a check mark by it.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
If you were to take your young self,
Okay.
who's seeing all these superstitions happen and you're not quite convinced, if the young you would have saw you in the future and seen what you believe now, what do you think that she would have said to you?
Probably wouldn't feel so lonely. Or at the time, I mentioned my parents worked constantly. I remember at church, one of the songs, the words just stuck in me. I don't know why I memorized the words, but it's the old rugged cross. And so,
I know that song.
So,
Yeah.
and I just, sometimes I'm lying there in bed, I can't fall asleep, and I'm singing the words. I had no idea what it meant. I didn't know what the cross was. I didn't know about Jesus. I didn't know anything, but I just just sang the song because that's what I learned. And then, but there's just emptiness. I mean, I went through my life. And then when I came to know the Lord later and I heard that song, I mean, like I start crying. It's like, oh, like it's like it's always been there, but I didn't make sense of it till I was older. So what I'm saying is, like, if my younger self had known what I know now, I probably would have just enjoyed my life more and just not been as lonely. I wasn't searching for anything. I was just living. It's just every day's the same day.
So maybe the difference between the young you that was questioning, a lot, and the older you is, it seems like you have, how do I put it, imbued with meaning. And you're not so, you said you're not so lonely.
Mm-hmm.
So this belief gives you a sense of companionship?
Yeah, purpose. For example, in my work, I'm a physician, and I see patients when they are sick enough to be hospitalized, because I only work in the hospital setting. I don't pray with everyone, but sometimes if I see a Bible, if I see signs, or I after I go through this view of why you're here, I mean, it's always crisis mode for you to be stuck in the hospital. I would just say, would you like for me to pray with you? And the only people who turned me down were Mormons. but which is fine, you know. I always just ask. But here's an example of how the Lord works. Okay, I cut everyone's hair in my family, my husband, my boys, and for some reason, out of the blue, I took care of this one gentleman who has a tumor growing in his spine. He came in because he just couldn't walk anymore, and it was one of those things where I couldn't really help him as the specialist, to figure out what it is, how to treat it, but it was pretty scary. I mean, he could barely get up and walk. I mean, so I saw him each day, and his hair was getting longer, and for some reason I felt that tug, and I'm like, oh, really, Lord? So I remember I said, this is a very bizarre thing to offer, and I don't ever really have offered this to a patient, but would you like for me to cut your hair? I was stuck in the hospital for weeks, and what's funny? I mean, it's just so, that's what I mean when sometimes things happen, and I'm just like, this is just so weird. Like, that's how I feel. It's not really for me, because I wouldn't have planned that. And the wife started crying. She said she was about to take him to the barber shop when all this happened, and his hair is growing, and all these people, come to visit and stuff, and he just looks kind of girly. His getting kind of long. So anyway, after my work hours, I came with my little hair cutting kit and set everything up, and I cut his hair. And what's cool that I found out was he was I don't know what he was exactly, but he's like a traveling pastor of some sort, where he plants churches. So it felt like, how Jesus says for us to serve others, and I felt so humbled to be able to have the opportunity. And of course, I only see him in the hospital. I don't know, the the outcome and things, but just being there, that she said it was an answered prayer, because how the heck she's gonna get him his haircut? He's stuck in the hospital, for maybe months, and I was there, and that happened anyway. So that's where for another example, I had another patient, a guy, everything was okay. He sat up and he smiled, seemed nice, and everything seemed okay, and I told him all the medical stuff of what's going on, and I felt that tug again, like, just asked if he wants a prayer, and I'm like, wow, that's just awkward. He seems fine. I usually can tell. I mean, if someone's a basket case, bad news, you just got cancer, you just have a massive stroke, you just have, you need a prayer, that's easy. But this guy was doing fairly well, and I remember just having that tug. So I was like, would you like a prayer? It just seems so awkward. It's almost like you're switching gears because everything was going okay. He just dropped immediately and just grabbed my hand and I prayed, and he was in tears, and he just, thank you, I needed that today. And I'm like, I wouldn't have known that, So those are the circumstances of the daily living, that it's not superstition. It's not, I feel like if I just when I feel that tug, sometimes I do ignore it, and I kind of wonder what would happen if I did. Like, I'm just kind of not feeling up to it. Yeah. I don't do anything about it,
I guess what I'm wondering is that tug that you have, how do you determine that that's from God and maybe not an internal thing?
Because I don't want to do those things. It feels awkward, and it feels uncomfortable, and it feels and it's not in my I was telling you,
okay.
How people say, I heard God said this. Like, how do you hear him say that? I don't hear any words, But that, I guess the tug would be, I guess some people would describe as the Holy Spirit. But I was telling you, I don't like putting labels and words and things. I just call it a tug. But it's thoughts that I wouldn't have thought of myself normally in my way. Because I was in the medical, in the doctor gear. This is going on, and it's just so weird. It just, all of a sudden I felt that, and I'm like, should I ignore it? And sometimes I do, and I kind of wonder what happened if I actually did something about it. But it's not. It's weird.
Can someone have an internal conflict or maybe an internal dialogue with themselves without God being involved?
Sure. I think that's the whole the mega marketing business of self-help.
So how did you determine that tug you have isn't a conversation between yourself?
Because I've tried to work with myself I do the self-help things too, and it's not, I always say it's not the same, because it's not something I intuitively would have thought about, and that's how I know it's not for me, because it's not, I feel like I can sense things and people's needs, and I can try to speak in a way that I can try to help others, but I feel like for me personally, I don't always can tell myself, okay, do this and you feel better, because I'm very honest. I'm honest with people. I'm honest with myself. Like, I just feel like, crap right now, or whatever going on, and I just want to stay there, and so I can't get myself out of that crap. I think without his help, like, for example, I grew up, I was telling you, my parents were hardly ever around. I didn't know you can label the word feeling abandoned or neglected, but at the time, there's no words for it. How do you describe that as a child? There was no abuse, but I was literally by myself most of the time. So then I got older, and there was like I see some people who need help, kind of thing, like whatever the life circumstances, and I would help them, but then they would expect me to overextend myself. And I find myself going. So some people say, "Well, you're being taken advantage of." Yeah, but so then I try to make sense of it. I'm like, why do when someone cry out like that, why do I just keep running to them, knowing that they're using me, right? So, and I couldn't figure it out. Like, why does it bother me so much that I'm willing to drop everything and go help someone when maybe that's not what's best. Like, they're not even thinking about me, So that was years ago, and I remember. So I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't
Yeah.
do the self-help thing. So I prayed about it. I said, Lord, why? Why is this happening? And then at that point, I remember. Still remember that day. I was just feeling horrible about myself. So I took a shower. My thing to him was like, Lord, you just show me in some way that you love me. I was like, you do it. I don't care. I need it right now, today. I remember saying that. And I got in the shower, and you just shower and it just comes on you, but it's just a regular shower, but I had dropped my soap, and you can say circumstantial, but when I got on the ground, the way the shower hits you from that angle, it just almost like a hug. It just encompasses your whole body when you're down, like in that position. So it's not just your hair, what I'm saying, hits your back or your head. When you're down there, and then it's just like you're surrounded by it. And I remember just laughing at myself, like, this feels so good. I was like, thank you. I just wanted something. And you could say it might not be, but after that, I realized what it was. You can say, some people can argue, well, you finally just came and figured it out yourself. But during that time, I asked, and it just came to me that because I felt abandoned, I did not want that friend to ever feel that way. So when I hear the cries, though, it was manipulation, but I just felt like you needed help, and no one helped me when I cried.
Yeah.
So I don't want anyone to ever feel abandoned. So I think that's just a setup for a disaster. Anyone can use you at that point. So I think I realized that there's a difference between people trying to manipulate you with circumstances, and actually there's a true need. But anyway, so I guess it took me a while to get to that, but things that happened that was kind of odd, that were maybe in part of my prayer, I just felt that was from him, because I just couldn't figure it out. Like, why would I keep doing things like that? So anyway,
it's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. That was way over 5 minutes, and I appreciate your time.
I'm going to, but well, good luck with. Now, what do you say you are again?
It's Street Epistemology. I have so epistemology is a philosophical term, and it means the study of knowledge, how we know things. And street is just, because I'm out in the public.
Cool.
And I have a card if you ever wanted to reach out to me. Some people reach out to me later because they, they wanted to, they thought of something after the talk or something like that, or they wanted to give me an update on their confidence, or whichever. So I just wanted a way for people to reach out.
Cool. Well, thank you. It's
right.
good to meet you.
Thank you.
You have a good day.
You too.